we explore the consequences and wonder what the future might have held. The Trouble with Diana.
The beginning of May, Kensington Palace on election night. The Princess of Wales, watching the results come in on television, can barely contain her glee.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
The man she'd had dinner with that night, one of her closest friends, was now at Labour's victory party at the Royal Festival Hall.
We were on the phone about 8-10 times, rejoicing at the win, and she was really over the moon. She was up till 5 in the morning watching it. She told me she'd met Blair on a few occasions before, and she was very much looking forward to him winning.
With what she called those ghastly Conservatives now gone, as well as New Labour, there was also a new Diana. As she strode the world stage, her fresh confidence was obvious. This is how she's remembered since her death. Beautiful, independent, compassionate, liberated.
It was a kind of new beginning in her life, and she had decided to do different things, and she was feeling free to talk to me, really.
Well, she didn't feel that she was treated right by the establishment, and she felt as if she's out of the cage.
Certainly when I was with her in August, the resurrection had begun and was completing its course.
But the last few months of her life were also controversial and often chaotic. Single again, divorced from the court, Diana was a princess on the loose.
There's no doubt that those who care about the royal family are very worried, I think, in those few months as to what this girl will get up to. I mean, she seemed capable of anything. She seemed reckless, almost demented.
Princess Diana was potentially a threat to the establishment and a threat to the royal family.
I think in the end she didn't give a stuff about the establishment.
It was Prince William's idea. In early June, Diana announced she was going to New York to sell dozens of the dresses she'd worn when married to Charles, the money to go to charity. The princess was shedding a skin. The clothes represented the past, and she was looking to the future.
And on the night of the auction, when she came over to me to talk to me, I said something like, it's the past and now everything's got to stand for itself. And there was something about her that said, look, I've got to make a change in my life. I can't just drift along in the same way that I'm going. She'd had this divorce, she'd had all these clothes. Where would she want to wear these clothes with all these associations?
13,000, 14,000, 15,000, 16,000. Last time, at 62,000, yours 108.
I think she saw this as a statement, as a change in her whole life, and as meaning that, yes, she was going to emerge as another sort of butterfly.
Just as Diana decided to sell her dresses, she made an extraordinary offer to a French journalist. The newspaper Le Monde had asked her to select a favourite photograph for an article. Diana wanted to tell the reporter and the world that she was redefining her life.
I don't know exactly the purpose and the reason why she accepted the interview, of course. Maybe I never know completely, but really I had the impression that she really wanted to say different things and to show that she was comfortable with her life and determined. And the way she said that now nobody could say her what to do and impose her different things. She said, I'm my best advisor.
As they sat in Diana's living room, the princess looked through a series of photographs of herself before selecting as her favourite a shot from a trip to Pakistan.
I asked her, well, this is a very tender picture, in a way, very warm picture. And she said, well, this is so important to touch. I do care for that, and I think people like that. They like to be touched at any time in your life. You need that kind of thing, and I always do that. And I said, well, this is not the way that a lot of people do, or royals, or other people, or very famous people, and she said, well, that's the way I always did. I think it's so important. But you know, the day when I entered in that family, nothing could be done naturally.
I remember one evening we were having dinner at a private club called Harry's Bar. She said, why don't we go to Annabelle's tonight? Let's go there. Impromptu, it wasn't planned. It was dancing till 2 in the morning. She loved dancing, loved to be a free person, which she wasn't allowed to do when she was married.
In Angola, the previous January, the princess had been criticised for highlighting the issue of landmines. The Tories were still in power, and she was accused of meddling in politics. But with the new Labour government now making encouraging noises, Diana determined to make it a personal crusade. Behind the scenes, a Conservative lord tried to help her steer a path away from controversy.
When she went to Angola, as you know, a British minister attacked her and said that she was interfering and being political. The last thing she was doing. I think she realized that if she was going to campaign on the ban, it would be political, it would be controversial.
At a speech in London on June the 12th, she shared a platform with one of Tony Blair's new ministers, Claire Short, and made it clear that despite the criticism from some Tory politicians, she was not going to let the issue drop.
She made a keynote speech, and I know exactly what the contents were because we worked together on it. And that keynote speech set out exactly where she stood on the issue of mines.
Angola has the highest rate of amputees in the world. How can countries which manufacture and trade in these weapons square their conscience with such human devastation? Some people chose to interpret my visit as a political statement, but it was not. I am not a political figure, and as I said at the time, and I'd like to reiterate now, my interests are humanitarian.
But the criticism didn't stop. The Daily Telegraph described the speech as an unusual gesture of support for the Blair administration.
For the princess to put herself so overtly at the head of a political campaign to abandon all landmines and deprive our own soldiers of the use of such landmines was, in my view, wrong of her.
It wasn't just landmines that were getting the princess into trouble. On Prince William's birthday, a week and a half later, Diana decided to take her sons to the cinema near Kensington Palace. She no longer had royal protocol to guide her and didn't check the subject matter of the film, The Devil's Own.
We spoke on the phone and she was crying. What happened? And she told me this. She took the boys to this IRA movie and the press found out.
97.3 FM.
Princess Diana is being criticised for taking her sons to see a controversial pro-IRA movie.
To take the princes there without, I believe, any consultation with their father or with the royal family as a whole was an impulsive gesture on the part of the princess. I don't think she knew what she was doing.
She did a lot of things on impulse without discussing or consulting if she thought it was right for her. Go for it.
It's 1 o'clock. I'm Joanna Gothling. Princess Diana has pulled out of a Commons Committee meeting on landmines in her second controversy this week.
What is wrong, I suppose, is that she's called the Princess of Wales. She's quasi-royal, and we have had a royal family which, since the early 19th century, has steered very clear of politics, and a very good thing, too.
It's a cross-party issue, this, nothing to do with individual parties, and it's quite wrong to make it so, and frankly, I'm disappointed that any member should be so short of media coverage that they've got to descend to this level.
I was very glad that she didn't go ahead with that meeting. I think it would have been overtly political. There was a great difference of opinion between the Conservative government and the successor government about landmines, and for the princess to take a stance in favour of one and against the other would not have been a proper role for a member of the royal family.
Diana put out a statement expressing her extreme disappointment and frustration. But her spirits revived when she got a call from Britain's new Prime Minister, who had a proposition for her.
Tony Blair invited her for Sunday lunch to offer her a role in some form. So she said, I'm going to take William with me. So she took William on a Sunday.
It was an informal affair at the Prime Minister's country retreat Chequers. She'd got on well with John Major when he was Prime Minister, but Tony Blair wanted a more purposeful relationship.
So So I asked her after this lunch, I said, if he asked you next time, what would you like to do, Diana, what would be your answer? Maybe you would leave it to you to suggest something. So what I'd really like to do is be a peacemaker, a mediator between countries who are fighting each other. I believe I can really do that.
Diana was excited about the prospect of a new public role, but she also desperately wanted a private life. The question was how. The answer came in the form of an old friend of her father's, Harrods owner Mohammed Al Fayed. The previous October, he'd persuaded her to attend a book launch at his store. Now, the man who claimed to have helped topple the Tory government made her an offer.
Mohammed said, well, what are you going to do for the summer? Why don't you bring your sons and come down to Saint-Tropez? And I think summers were always a bit difficult for her. After the divorce, she couldn't go to Balmoral, she couldn't go to Highgrove. You have two strapping teenage sons. What do you do with them in the middle of summer?
I said, you know, what are you getting yourself into? Because 2 months before that, she had told me that Mohammed Al Fayed had offered to pay £25,000 to any charity of her choice if she would open 2 elevators, new lifts in Harrods. So she made a joke. She said, I told him, contact my ex-sister-in-law. She might be more interested in me. She said, I don't want to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did say I thought she'd have a wonderful holiday, and I hoped very much that this could be achieved without a great deal of unwelcome press attention.
Yeah, so just be careful of this privacy. Don't tell anybody that you're invited by Mohammed Al Fayed. It may not go down well in the British society because of his controversial figure. He hasn't been given British nationality after trying for over 10 years. So she said, I understand it's very private, so well, let's keep it that way.
The Al Fayeds devised a plan to spirit Diana and the 2 young princes down to Saint-Tropez. Prince Charles had given permission for the trip. His sons had royal bodyguards. But the princess, stripped of her royal title, had no official protection, and only the super-rich could now supply the privacy she craved. On July the 11th, a helicopter, a private jet, a limousine, and finally a motor launch delivered the party to the Al Fayed's secluded villa on the coast. But as the boat tied up, the press were already watching them.
They arrived at the jetty over there. In Saint-Tropez, we're a little group of half a dozen local photographers, and we knew as soon as they arrived. The word spread very quickly.
And it was well into Saturday afternoon that I had the first press call saying, does Mr. Al Fayed have a yacht called Saxara? So I said no, but he does have a teak schooner called Saqqara. So they said, well, we've got a picture of a chap who looks like him and somebody who looks like the Princess of Wales on the deck of this schooner.
Once she became aware that the press had discovered her, Diana's attitude towards the cameras seemed to change.
She used to come down the jetty, get onto the Saqqara, Mohammed Al Fayed's boat, and take a trip round the bay with the boys, swimming, jet skiing, diving. It was like a huge photo call every day.
There then ensued this press siege, and at one stage Mohammed had 20 security people deployed night and day on the estate, and still in the middle of the night men in designer clothes with Nikons round their neck were crawling through the undergrowth in order to what? Try and get close to the buildings where they were.
Far from escaping the paparazzi, the princess found herself at the center of press attention. Within a day of their arrival, the French resort was heaving with photographers and reporters. Not only had Diana and the princes been discovered on the Med, their host could hardly have been more controversial.
I remember writing at the time that the Princess of Wales seemed to design her personal publicity to cause maximum embarrassment to the royal family. She didn't care about anything as long as her own wishes and transient emotions were gratified. And that, I think, was rather frightening to contemplate.
Mohammed and the princess attempted to deal with the press intrusion in a good-humoured way. I mean, they waved and then said, please, would you just give us some space? And these appeals were treated with either dumb insolence or amused contempt.
3 days into her holiday, exasperated, the princess called an extraordinary waterborne news conference.
Diana took a little boat and went over there to see the British press, who were watching from a hired launch. She was with them for about 15 minutes.
She told reporters they'd get a big surprise with the next thing she did, pleading with them to leave her alone. But far from appeasing the press, her appeals were greeted with derision.
The paparazzi actually set up home here for the whole summer. They're here for 3 months. She just never thought about it properly at all. And she was going to get caught within minutes, and that's precisely what happened.
Our royal correspondent, James Whittaker, said to her, look, do you want us to pull out? I will call my editor, because he knew that she and I had contact about this kind of thing before. And he said, I will call him and we'll pull out. And she said, no, I'm not asking you to do that. I just want to know how long you're going to be here. It was very precise what she was saying, rather confusing.
Perhaps not so confusing. While the boys were with Diana, their father, Prince Charles, was preparing a huge garden party for his mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles. The £50,000 bash was to be held on July the 18th at Highgrove, his place near Tetbury in Gloucestershire.
Nobody actually wanted to be disloyal to either side, and so it was a very difficult time. It was very much an attempt to put Charles and Camilla together as a unit, and it was definitely a PR exercise going on at that time, I felt.
Piers Morgan even published an extraordinary mock-up of what the pair might look like as man and wife.
And what we were saying was, look, we all know you're seeing Camilla. There's no secret. Everyone knows that. You've been apart from Diana for a long time. You're divorced. You're perfectly entitled to see her. Stop being so silly about it.
But bobbing around on the Med, Diana was far from happy that a woman who'd helped destroy her marriage should be rehabilitated.
And if you're Princess Diana and you want to get on the front page of the papers, then you go to a place where the photographers are and you look fantastic. And if you're going to look your best in your leopard skin bikini, then what better day to do it than Camilla Parker Bowles' 50th birthday? We all did the rather corny, perhaps, front pages of postcards from Diana in south of France, Happy Birthday Camilla, with these stunning pictures, which I think she found very amusing.
There was no secret that she hated Camilla Parker Bowles, but I must admit that she was quite manipulative, I must say. She nearly always got what she wanted in a nice way.
If the palace had hoped Diana's divorce settlement amounted to a deal that she'd lower her profile, they were mistaken. The paparazzi were making their fortunes in the south of France, and actually, they'd missed the big story. At some point between July the 12th and 20th this year, Dodi Al-Fayed quietly joined Diana aboard his family's luxury yacht at Saint-Tropez and began one of the love affairs of the century.
What is interesting, in the whole of the coverage, the saturation coverage, the very unwelcome coverage that attended that holiday, nobody ever spoke about Dodi. He was never mentioned.
Diana and Dodi were an item. It was a well-kept secret. But Mohammed Al-Fayed knew that the story would eventually get out and determined to try and manage the news.
Mohammed phoned me up, asked me if I'd be prepared to have a word with Dodi and to keep an eye on him. And I asked why, and he said, well, because there's a few things going on which are going to be capturing the public imagination worldwide concerning Dodi and Diana.
Dodi, perhaps reassured by his conversation with Max Clifford, decided to take Diana and Princes William and Harry off the boat to sample a bit of Saint-Tropez nightlife.
They had a lovely evening here in my nightclub. A really lovely time. And here's Dodi and Diana's table. And here's the dance floor, and you can see it's very intimate. And over there is our in-house disc jockey.
Notre DJ. The party, including the two princes, Mario, various bodyguards, Diana and Dodi, did the conga round the disco. Later, the princess and her new lover danced cheek to cheek.
She was very maternal with the boys and very passionate with Dodi.
The day after getting back from Saint-Tropez, July the 21st, Diana opened a new children's ward at a hospital in northwest London. Her romance was still a secret, and plans were being hatched for a second holiday, this time alone with Dodi and out of sight of the cameras.
They went away for a weekend to Paris at the Ritz Hotel, which nobody knew about. And then they went away on the yacht Jonical. And they were actually back in this country on the Wednesday. And we were holding our thumbs and crossing our fingers and hoping that the press would never know about this.
And then word got out that there were this set of pictures. And her reaction was very interesting. She was, to quote her office, very relaxed about the publication of the pictures. That is Diana speak, for she was very happy about it.
I said to Dodi, what about this stuff? Allegedly there's a shot of a kiss. I actually said to him, did you kiss Diana in public? And he said, no, Michael. He said, we were at sea, moving. He said, I think we hugged each other in a sort of friendly sort of way. And I said, well, that's enough. There were people on boats, there were people stalking you, there were people there.
My advice to him was, well, you know what's coming. It won't cause any problems. The British public in particular will be very happy if she's got involved with a man who they can see to be kind and caring and someone that genuinely loves her for the right reasons.
Parts of the British establishment were not going to be pleased.
No, but then the British establishment, you know, who cares?
Max Clifford, Michael Cole and Mohammed Al-Fayed had been planning for this day. The photos of Diana and Dodi were being hawked round Fleet Street as Mohammed celebrated buying Fulham Football Club. He seemed almost pleased that the identity of his son's latest girlfriend had emerged.
It's all right, he's in movie business, you know, that's all right, doesn't bother him.
Mr. Al-Fayed had a very encouraging message, which said that the Prince of Wales was quite content about this matter. This message was not sought, it was volunteered.
She was saying, look, this guy is my new man. Take our picture, I don't care.
Diana and Dodi didn't seem to mind that their love affair was now public property. Mohammed Al-Fayed seemed positively pleased. Prince Charles was apparently content. But as the British public got their first glimpse of the kiss, the Queen's biographer Sarah Bradford wrote, "You can't help regretting that this beautiful woman has chosen someone so trivial."
I thought at the time that she was allowing her position to be prostituted. She was being exploited for publicity purposes by the Al-Fayeds. She seemed completely unaware of any context in which she acted. She seemed, at her worst, at her most selfish.
2 days before the kiss photograph was finally published, Diana had left the country. Not a holiday this time. On August the 8th, she flew to Sarajevo in Bosnia, with Lord Deeds acting as her defence against the paparazzi.
What I did try to do on her behalf, because I was with her all the time, I acted as her press officer, you might say. I was trying to take the weight off her, so I did in fact do a bit of briefing.
Diana's answer to the press siege was to try and use it to further her landmines crusade. She took the hundreds of journalists and photographers who'd followed her to Bosnia up to Sarajevo's rubbish dump, the poorest part of a city horribly disfigured by war. This is home to 15-year-old Mirzeta Gabeljic, who lost part of her leg when she stepped on a landmine as she walked to market.
When you finally met Diana, was she like you expected her to be?
I thought that the princess will come in a very nice long dress, as any other princess. She came in trousers, and then I realized this is a totally new world. This is not the first century.
This is
Robert. I'm Jesuit representative in Rosetta.
When we were in Bosnia, she would never allow any interview to take place in less than 30 minutes, because she knew how long people who suffered take to tell their story.
Will you say she can speak at all? She needs to go.
She had this marvelously natural way of getting people who'd suffered to open up and tell her all about their suffering, and it did them, you could see it did them good. Magic. Magic. After that awful war.
Well, we talk a lot. She asked me if my leg hurts, and she asked me how do I feel. But everything was in a very upset manner, because there were between 200 and 300 journalists around.
Somebody said to her, they supposed that she got used to being photographed all the time. And I remember her reply, which was, no, you don't. That's the real trouble, that you don't get used to it. I was alongside her all the time and felt the impact of these sudden encounters with 5 cameras, rolling cameras, 50 ordinary cameras, and maybe 20 reporters with notebooks. If you suddenly hit the buffers like that, it is alarming.
After 2 days of life illuminated by 50 flashbulbs, the princess found sanctuary at the Elephant Hotel near Sarajevo with an informal dinner on the Saturday night. Dodi wasn't supposed to be on the menu.
We came in and it has 2 television sets, one to my right and one to my left, and in fact both of them were at that moment showing Sky News.
The heir to the £1 billion Harrods empire. He's dated a string of models and actresses: Brooke Shields, Joanne Whalley, Winona Ryder.
So actually the first thing we did was we requested that the hotel switch that off, because this wasn't what she was, the kind of evening that she'd be looking for. When she spoke about British politics, she said on one occasion, those ghastly conservatives, and repeated that they had actually obstructed various initiatives which she had hoped to get underway.
Those comments would have landed Diana back in deep trouble had they come out. As it was, the news about Dodi continued to exercise her critics.
I think it was dangerous for the royal family to have a member of its clan, as it were, behaving in that kind of irresponsible fashion.
I thought that the Fayeds were acting in a rather biased way to try and get this young girl to become almost part of their inner circle, and I really didn't like it one little bit, and I don't think many people did.
The never-ending criticism of her public and private life, combined with the constant press presence, had settled one thing in Diana's mind. She had to escape.
She said, well, you know how the press is here? The press is ferocious. It's always looking for the tiny mistake I'm going to do, and everybody can make a mistake. At that moment, she said, you know, everybody sane would have left this country a long time ago. But I can't. I have my sons.
Now, there were these rumours about her leaving the country. What was the truth about that?
She was determined to make a home away and just come here to be with the children and so on. She was very serious about that. The reason was, there was no other reason except for the media hounding her.
It wasn't just Diana who was under attack. Just as Mohammed Al-Fayed had anticipated, the press were dismantling Dodi's reputation, alleging that he had debts, that he dated and dumped a string of glamorous girlfriends, and had had a serious cocaine habit.
We talked and he told me about previous girlfriends, and I said, well, okay, there's bound to be 2 or 3 of them that are going to come out because they're suddenly going to see an opportunity to make a name for themselves, to make a lot of money for themselves. So don't be surprised. And that's, of course, exactly what happened.
In Los Angeles, right on cue, up popped the tragic ex-girlfriend. one Kelly Fisher.
Miss Fisher is willing to meet with the princess anywhere in the world. We think the princess should know what has happened with Miss Fisher and how she and her family have suffered and are still suffering.
My attitude and my advice to him was, well, just let it run its course, because I don't think it's going to be too difficult for the public to see the young lady for what she really is. Her television appearances with the lawyer and mum, almost, you know, crying on cue. I think most of the public pretty much got the flavour of what she was all about.
Despite Max Clifford's best efforts, the story of the princess and the playboy was gaining momentum. With the paparazzi in full cry, on July the 21st, Diana and Dodi headed off for their third and final holiday aboard the Al Fayed yacht.
They were on their last holiday together on Jonical. The boat put into Monte Carlo, and they went ashore. It was in the evening, and they went to a shop of the company Reposi, and they looked at two rings.
She saw on window, and she want this. So we prepare the delivery. I adapt a lot of our models on the character of the client. With Princess Diana was not so difficult.
It was a ring that she could have worn all the time?
Yes, of course.
A diamond ring called Tell Me Yes, an Egyptian playboy, a Muslim to boot, the mother of the future king. The combination sent shivers down a few spines.
I'm a particularly conservative. I like to think that the future King of England at least starts off the job without a blemish, and I don't think he could have done with Dodi as the stepfather.
I just thought it was hilarious. Hilarious. The idea of them all sitting there at various castles and palaces having to accept the fact that, you know, one day Diana might marry Dodi Fayed. Just too amusing for words and great payback. But if you ask me if it was deliberate, I think definitely not.
But she just didn't care about their reaction. In a way, that showed a new confidence.
I was just told she was just in love with him. Just fell madly in love with this guy.
I said, till I start saving up for a wedding present. So when is the big day? She said, no, there's no wedding. Definitely no wedding, but I'm having a lot of fun. I'm enjoying myself. She said, I want you to meet Dodi, and perhaps we can have dinner together. And on the 9th, tentatively fixed 9th of September, which was a Tuesday week. She said, I'll confirm it to you on Sunday when I get back. I said, I know one girl who was ex-girlfriend. Shall I call her? She said, yes, do that. As a surprise. So I asked this lady, and she had agreed to come as well as a surprise to him. So it was tentatively fixed, as I said, 9th of September. Never happened.
The honor de Diana had had 4 holidays that summer, 29 days on the Mediterranean. It was a month since she'd seen her children. But with August turning into September, it was time to head home to her sons. And then, on Wednesday the 27th, Le Monde newspaper published the article based on Diana's interview nearly 2 months earlier. It was expected to be innocuous, but one quote had the British press in a lather.
She said the policy has changed now. Now the new government has decided to stop and is going to forbid, you know, the landmine. I think this is wonderful. I'm so happy with that, and I think this government is going to make a terrific work. Remember the word terrific. Well, the former one was hopeless about that. But, you know, there was such a fuss after what I printed about that, but I think that was very important for her, and this was her crusade.
Diana denied the remarks, but few believed her. An editorial in Thursday's Daily Telegraph said she'd been caught on the wrong side of the political fence and accused her of emotional outbursts. The Labour-supporting Mirror newspaper, of course, loved it. Saturday morning, and Diana, under fire over both her politics and her private life, was now at the eye of the biggest media storm for months.
As the couple arrived at Sardinia Airport at the end of their last holiday, the paparazzi were on their tail.
There were photographers at the airport, and by whatever means, the news got out that they were going to Paris. And when they arrived at Le Bourget, there were 8 photographers there. Now, the princess might have gone on in the plane to London, and they might have split up there, but she went into Paris. I think one of the reasons might have been that she was going to look at the rings.
At 6:30, Dodi walked out of the Ritz and across the Place Vendôme to collect a diamond ring from the jewelers. Later that evening, the hotel security cameras silently recorded him and Diana as they tried to dodge the paparazzi camped outside by sneaking out a back entrance. The couple were making for what they hoped would be the haven of Dodi's flat by the Arc de Triomphe. As they sped across town, photographers were in pursuit. Their driver, his reactions slowed by booze and pills, lost control of the Mercedes as they travelled at high speed into a short Paris underpass. Diana had been accused of causing trouble in life, but in death she set far greater challenges for palace, politicians, and press.
I was asleep in bed, and the phone rang, and there was a journalist. He said, "I'm sorry," he said, "but Dodi's been killed." I then immediately rang Mohammed at his home in Oxted, and he simply said, "Let's find out, Michael, let's just find out. I'm going to find out. And let us pray that it isn't so."
I got a call from one of our news desk to say that he'd just heard on the grapevine there'd been an accident in France, and it was involving a car carrying Diana and Dodi, but that he thought I should know that it involved paparazzi photographers. And my immediate thought was, oh, this is disaster. It's just going to play into everybody's hands about press intrusion, press harassment. You know, it's going to be a nightmare.
At about the same time, a phone rang inside 10 Downing Street. Britain's ambassador in Paris spoke to the duty clerk. The Prime Minister, away in his constituency in County Durham, was immediately woken for a conference call with his press secretary Alistair Campbell and a civil servant. They were told Dodi was dead, but there was as yet no firm news about Diana. Then, around 3 a.m., word filtered through from Paris.
When I received the call saying that Diana had not survived, I was standing in my kitchen. It was like being hit in the solar plexus. I fell on my knees, to my knees. I fell to my knees. And my wife was with me. And we both cried.
The phones to Downing Street were now so busy that the second conference call of the night had to be conducted on mobiles. This, Tony Blair told his press secretary, is going to produce grief on a scale none of us have ever seen.
I was completely stunned like everybody else, and I then watched television for about half an hour and then went into work about 5:30, and it was just a very already funereal atmosphere. Everybody was looking at themselves thinking, God, you know, has the unthinkable happened? Have we finally killed Diana?
The editor of The Sun told me he cried, and I believe him. He, who'd been somewhat critical of Diana in the past, and many journalists have been very critical, felt a blow to the solar plexus. And I think many of them who I spoke to later said that they were shocked at their own reaction, shocked at their shock.
As the world woke up to the news, Tony Blair arrived at his local church. The people are going to need direction, he'd told Alistair Campbell. They must be shown it's okay to grieve. He and his press secretary had worked together in the early hours, trying to find the right words.
She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
Before the royal family's journey to church at Balmoral, both the Queen and Prince Charles had spoken to Tony Blair. He told them he would give any help he could. The palace recognised the new government's public relations skills. and before the morning was out, were to wish they were as sure-footed. The appearance of Princes William and Harry only hours after their mother's violent death brought swift criticism.
I was appalled, actually. I'm not appalled that they went to worship or they went to pray, but I was appalled that they had to be taken in such a public way when really, I'm sure that what they wanted to do, those boys, was to sit down at home and cry.
Draped over Diana's coffin as her body left Paris, the Queen's standard, which had been taken to France by Prince Charles. The symbolism was revealing. In death, the princess had had her royal status restored. As Diana flew home, Dodi's body was already in England. Al Fayed's staff had gone into Harrods and worked since before dawn on arrangements to ensure a burial within 24 hours, the Muslim custom.
Mohammed wasn't going to bring his son home in the G4, in the plane, because you couldn't get the coffin round the corner. And he wouldn't put him in the hold. He was not going to put him in the baggage hold. So he came home in the helicopter, which is a big helicopter, and the coffin was laid between the 2 rows of seats inside the passenger cabin. And then he had to be taken to the mortuary at Hammersmith and Fulham. But the strange thing is that as Dodi's coffin left the mortuary, hers was arriving. It was almost as if they passed.
As Diana's body arrived back at RAF Northolt earlier on the Sunday evening, Lord Airlie, the Queen's representative accompanying Prince Charles, had a quiet word with the Prime Minister. "I need your help," he said. He knew it was vital for the royal family, perhaps for the very future of the monarchy, that they get things right. Next morning, just before 10, Tony Blair's press secretary was spotted going into Buckingham Palace for the first of what became daily strategy meetings. The government denied they were telling the Queen what to do. Around the table, the Lord Chamberlain, Lord Airlie, and Sir Robert Fellows representing the Queen, Alistair Campbell for the government, and Michael Gibbons, the Princess's private secretary. Diana's brother Charles, representing the Spencer family, did not attend the meetings, preferring to make his points later directly to Sir Robert.
The palace took the view that this was the Spencer family's funeral primarily. They were there to help, and they gave every form of help they could, but they didn't want to trespass into the private grief of that family. And that caused a certain amount of tension, and Charles Spencer is a difficult boy. Anybody who knows him knows that.
Despite the tensions, the strategy team quickly agreed the style and tone of the funeral. It was in fact Lord Airlie who proposed the event should combine the traditional and modern, and suggested that representatives from Diana's charities should walk behind the coffin. But while the plans were being made inside the palace, on the other side of the high railings, something unexpected and potentially explosive was happening.
Because the royal family were up in Scotland, rather away from the capital and everything, I don't think they realised at the beginning the strength of feeling that had been aroused.
There was an anger within the people, an anger that they'd lost an icon, an anger that they'd lost this wonderful character, and they needed somebody to blame. Who do they blame? They blame the royal family. They've got to blame somebody.
The royal family had not been seen since the Sunday morning. The flagpole on Buckingham Palace remained empty. The Queen was only due to come to London late on Friday. Tony Blair warned that reaction to Diana's death threatened to destabilise the country.
I think some palace aides were saying, look, this could get completely out of hand. You know, somebody actually said to me that they were thinking that at one stage there might be a storming of the palace. And I burst out laughing, and they said we weren't joking. There was rebellion in the air.
By Wednesday, deep concern. A team of 26 were now meeting daily at the palace, with a sense that while the government could do nothing wrong, the royals could do nothing right. They'd had to lengthen the funeral route. More condolence books had had to be opened at St James's, from 4 to 43. Tony Blair had just spoken to Prince Charles when he left Downing Street to walk among the crowds. They'd agreed the Queen needed to get a grip on the situation. her Prime Minister was showing the way. The public mood was already volatile, and that anti-royal feeling was being encouraged by a worried tabloid press.
They were extremely concerned about the origins of those stories which suggested that she'd been more or less killed by the paparazzi. So they wanted to go deeper and say, look, who really caused this situation? Who made this woman so sad? Who put her in the position that she'd have to be driving about with an Egyptian playboy in a Paris underpants? Oh, it must be the royal family. They isolated her, they made her sad, they took away her title, they marginalised her, they abused her. It must be the family's fault.
Only days after the Queen was criticised for allowing the princes to be seen, 4 national tabloids now attacked her for hiding away.
The press in the end had to prompt them into doing the right thing. But we were prompting them because our readers were ringing us in their thousands saying, why aren't they doing anything? And people may not like that. They may not like the fact that the tabloids all came out and said, talk to us, Mum, as we did on the Mirror. But I think that was a very powerful thing that we did.
At 10 o'clock that Thursday morning, the meeting at Buckingham Palace was addressed by one of the Queen's private secretaries, Robin Janvrin. He brought a message from Balmoral. The plan, he told them, had changed. Events moved rapidly. Within hours, the royal family appeared outside the gates at Balmoral to walk among the flowers. Princes Andrew and Edward were instructed to talk with mourners in the Mall. The Queen flew to London almost a day earlier than planned, and on the eve of the funeral spoke to the nation. The broadcast was live, and at the suggestion of a sound recordist, the window was left open so viewers could see and hear the crowds outside.
So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart.
They were moving in an unprecedented situation and making it up as they went along. But the desire was to get the whole thing right. The concern was that it would go wrong. The relief at the end was that it had turned out with great dignity and was a very moving occasion.
By the time Diana's body was moved to Kensington Palace on that Friday night, resentment against the royal family had been at least deflected. What no one knew then was that far from destroying the monarchy, Diana may ultimately have saved it. Her instincts reflected the times, and since her death, the public's devotion to her has already forced the royal family to embark on a period of rapid change, to modernize, to appear more like her.
All you hear now is breaches of protocol. Protocol has died. It's gone out of the window. And what a great thing that is for everybody. Everybody in my generation just says, thank God for that.
Her influence could have been baneful and destructive. In fact, as it turned out, it hasn't been. But Diana was always a sign of contradiction.
Being in the Abbey, one was just conscious of a wonderful ceremony and how moving it was, seeing the coffin come up with all the flowers on it. I think that it must have been very tough for the royal family, and they must have had a lot of soul searching to even try and work out how they should handle it.
The unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana.
I thought it was an incredible moment. The applause we could hear outside literally did roll down the nave. And I turned to Mohammed and I said, this is incredible. We don't applaud in church, but everybody was applauding.
I had 3 handkerchiefs wet. I mean, I couldn't stop crying. And even now when I think about it, it's one of the saddest things. And I think sometimes I still think, is it reality?
It doesn't do any good to try and pretend she was a saint. Last thing she'd wish to have thought of. She wasn't a saint, subject to all the woes of Adam and Eve and their successors.
Although a princess, she was someone for whom, from afar, we dared to feel affection, and by whom we were all intrigued.
Intriguing is exactly the right word, and I think we leave it there. After all, they left it there in the Abbey. And I'm very happy to leave it there. Intriguing. She was intriguing.